Republican Judd Gregg is the ranking member on the Senate Budget Committee. Senator, welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Trace.
I know you're a big deficit hawk. We've had you on the program a number of times. You've been preaching you got to cut the deficit. You've got to cut the debt for a long time now. So when the president proposes freezing some of these spending initiatives, do you believe that that's a good first step or simply window dressing?
Well, it's a step in the right direction depending on what it really is. If it's a freeze plus inflation, it's not a freeze. If it's a freeze that doesn't include the TARP money, it's really not a freeze because that gives you another $300 billion of spending room theoretically. If it's a freeze that doesn't eliminate stimulus spending after 2010 because obviously we're outside the recession, then it's not a freeze. So let's look and see what the actual language is, but at least I give the president credit for putting forward the concept and getting us on in the right area, on the right page to talk about it.
But it seems like Senator, the president is kind of walking that fine line, because we were talking to Bill McGurn from the Wall Street Journal the last hour, and he was saying, look, these cuts are not big enough to really placate the Republicans who wanted bigger cuts, and they're too big, and so he's going to alienate many on his base. Is he walking a fine line of dangerous territory?
Well, they're obviously not big enough. On a $1.34 trillion deficit, that's $1.34 trillion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big number. $25 billion it's a lot of money, $25 billion, but compared to the deficit, it's really not very significant. So you got to do a lot more. Specifically, you have to address entitlements. I mean, that's where the money is. The government over the last year has grown from 20% of GDP up to 25% of GDP. Yeah. Quite simply, we can't afford that. I mean, it's just simply too big. And we've got to get down to the business of reducing the rate of growth of this government, backing it up, and basically making it more affordable. And yes, you've got to go beyond discretionary spending to do that, because non-defense discretionary is less than 20% of the whole budget.
Okay, now, Senator, we want to pivot a little bit, because pivot's the biggest word now in D.C., right? You've heard it 1,000 times. Every show I turn on, they're talking about pivot. You got to pivot, right? So we're going to pivot a little bit here. Yeah, and are you surprised at how much the administration has pivoted away from health care toward jobs and toward things that you, quite frankly, talked about with us ad nauseum here several months ago, toward jobs, toward the economy?
Well, yes. No, I'm not surprised, because they don't have a tin ear down there. I mean, the president didn't get elected by having a tin ear, and the message from Massachusetts was a rather resounding banging of the drum, and they obviously heard it. The American people are interested in a government that they can afford and that passes on to our children a better nation than what we receive from our parents. And they're extraordinarily worried that because of the growth of this government, that's not going to be the case, that we're going to pass on to our children a government so burdened with debt that our kids will not be able to have as prosperous an existence or a lifestyle as we've had. And I think the administration has heard at least part of that message from Massachusetts, and it's all across the country. It's not just Massachusetts, certainly New Hampshire.
Yeah, and I want to put up on the screen what Steny Hoyer said. And did we have the soundbite, or we have this on the screen? We have the soundbite. Steny Hoyer, no, we have this. I want you to either hear this. Is that right, soundbite?
Okay.
Listen. Oh, we don't have it.
There are no easy choices. But the objective of accessible, affordable, quality health care remains.
Yeah, and he said, look, there are four choices. No bill at all, scaled back bill, the House passing the Senate bill, or making some changes to accommodate everybody, to make sure everybody's happy. Are any of those choices good for you?
Number two, basically we should do health reform, but do it in a step-by-step basis, addressing those issues which we can fix and which do not massively expand the government and create a lot of pressure on companies to drop their insurance plans so people are forced onto some sort of quasi-government plan, and does not expand a new entitlement and doesn't cut Medicare for the purposes of expanding a new entitlement. There are a lot of things we can do in this area. I have a bill that does a lot of those things, and there's a lot of, you could reach some bipartisan consensus here if they wanted to step back and do it that way. And we've been for that as the member of the minority, the Republican Party, here for a while.
You're going to be there tomorrow night, I'm sure, Senator, and you're listening there. I want to know what you want to hear from the president as he steps to the podium.
Well, I'd rather not hear focus group comments, I mean, I understand that everybody does focus groups around here and then regurgitates what they say. I'd like to hear him call for some boldness in the area of getting this government under control. which will be a significant change, of course, if he does. I'd like to hear him say that, you know, there really should be a bipartisan effort here that should be real on the issues that are important to Americans, and we haven't seen that so far. Yeah. And I'd like him to point out to the American people again that we are at risk as a nation from a very serious group of people who want to do us harm, which is the fundamentalist Islamic movement, and that we've got to redouble our efforts to make sure that they can't do us harm. Are we going to hear that? It wouldn't surprise me, actually, if we did hear a lot of that, but then you got to follow it up with action. You know, that's the bottom line here. We have not seen a lot of action out of this administration. We've heard a lot of speeches, but when it comes to actually doing something that follows up on some of these speeches that I might agree with, it's been less than an aggressive.
You want a physical. Initiative. You want the physical pivot, is what you're saying. You know, when I was quarterback in college, the pivot was you just turned around and you hand off. Now it's a whole different meaning. You want the physical pivot to follow the words up with action, Senator. It's good of you, sir.
We want to see some heavy lifting down here from the administration to get this government under control.
Good of you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Control.
Thank you.
Thank you.